I'm now pleased to introduce Deborah Laurel, New York City Audubon's Board Secretary, to open our annual meeting.
Good afternoon. Welcome to New York City Audubon's 2023 Annual Meeting of Members. I'm pleased to share the results of our Board of Directors election. First, a bit about our election process. It is customary that we conduct the election for a time period of 1 month, and we closed the voting period last night. We have 1,479 current members that are eligible to vote. Those members received their ballots around April 28th by mail and email, and were invited to cast votes online or by mail through June 6th. Members received unique IDs to cast their ballots, which were anonymous. 115 ballots were cast, exceeding the minimum number required by our bylaws. And I'm happy to report that all nominated directors were voted into office. Our members, we have 5 new members, little description, little bios on them. Briefly, Mary Jane Boland, recently retired from NYU, has been involved with New York City Audubon for some time as a Project Safe Flight and Injured Bird volunteer, a member of our advisory council, and a leader on our special events committee that plans our annual Fall Roost fundraiser. Simon Keys has a banking background, was a director of Silicon Valley Bank, and Simon has been a leader in New York City Audubon's Young Conservationist Council for several years. He's an expert birder who knows all of the best spots in Prospect Park. Dr. Georgia Silvera Siemens is an urban ecologist whose work is focused on parks in New York City, but especially Washington Square Park, where she has co-founded a program called Washington Square Eco Projects. She's been active already on New York City Audubon's Education and Public Programs Committee, and has been and is a member of our advisory council. Lily Taylor is an actress, a writer, and a vocal advocate for birds. Lily is on the board of directors of National Audubon and the American Birding Association, and has volunteered for several years with New York City Audubon's 9/11 Tribute in Light Memorial to monitor how the light affects the birds migrating on September 11th. Sharon Weidberg is an audit expert from PricewaterhouseCoopers and a nature enthusiast with past experience at McFall Environmental Center in New Jersey. We're delighted to add the passion, talent, and expertise of these 5 new directors to our team. We also congratulate directors who were re-elected to new terms and as officers. Mike Yuan was re-elected to his second 2-year term as executive vice president, as was Drianne Benner as treasurer. Dr. Richard Vietz, who has served as director, was elected as vice president, and 2 directors were re-elected to their second terms, Stephen Dean and Elizabeth Norman. I'm pleased to share with you the full list of directors for 2022-2023. Now my notes say 2022. I thought that was odd. 2023 to 2024, per the slide that you see on your screen. As we announce these changes to our board membership, I would like to take a moment to speak about a sorrowful loss for New York City Audubon's board and staff. In March, our valued board member and friend, Cesar Castillo, passed away very unexpectedly. He was 43. He's survived by his wife, Wendy, and their 3 children, Giselle, Elise, Santiago, and his parents, Nelsie and Rolando. Cesar served on our board from 2018 to 2023. Cesar was a beloved member of the New York City birding community and a fixture at Queens College, where he was an adjunct professor of biology and senior laboratory technician. Cesar's love of natural history began in his grandmother's backyard in Columbia. He came to the US at age 4 and continued his inquiry of the wonders of nature throughout his life. He developed multiple skills as a botanist, as a birder, and as a naturalist. Cesar believed everyone should have access to nature and that birding could lead to a deeper understanding of local ecosystems and foster a desire to protect them. He was a member of New York City Audubon's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Accessibility Committee, as well as the Conservation and Public Program Committees. Cesar's warmth and gentle demeanor made him an easy person to talk to and to learn from. With his remarkable memory and sense of direction, he could tell you exactly where he saw a bird, what it was doing, the exact time of day, and map how to get there. We miss him very much and have started an annual bird outing in Queens in his honor. The inaugural Cesar Castillo Memorial Queens County Birdathon took place in May with 4 bird walks organized jointly by the Queens County Bird Club, New York City Audubon, and the Queens College Biology Department. 101 species were seen during this first event, which raised money for New York City Audubon's expansion of Queens programming events that aim to attract new and diverse audiences. We hope you will join us each year at this event as we remember Cesar. We are grateful for his contributions to birding, and we will miss him. It is now my pleasure to introduce Karen Benfield, New York City Audubon's president.
Thank you, Deborah, very much for that moving tribute and also for your service as board secretary. Well, welcome to our new board members and congratulations to the full board. Board members serve as stewards and fiduciaries of the organization and commit ourselves to the mission of this nonprofit. So as we welcome our new directors tonight who are joining our longstanding work, I'd like to thank our past board members, including many who remain involved on our advisory council. We're building upon work that many other people have done and started, and we couldn't be more proud to do so. Tonight, I thought I would talk a little bit about Pale Male, who died last month. In mid-May, as many of you know, one of our urban park rangers picked up a red-tailed hawk from the ground in the park. It was an older bird, light in color, and it was unwell. It was taken to a rehabber, and the hawk, known to New Yorkers as Pale Male, died of renal failure, sadly. New York City Audubon will celebrate the life of this remarkable raptor later this year, but I wanted to talk tonight a little bit about his connection to the work and the mission that we're here to share with you tonight. Few people here need to be reminded about the magic of watching Pale Male and what thousands of New Yorkers experienced. From a bench adjacent to the Hans Christian Andersen statue in Central Park, a community formed and celebrated what felt like an urban fairy tale, a pair of red-tailed hawks building a nest on a fancy Fifth Avenue building. Pale Male was easy to observe, hunting in the park, soaring over Fifth Avenue, and perching in a territory that ranged year-round from 68th to 88th Street, Park Avenue to Central Park West. He nested successfully for the first time in 1995, and his antics and adventures were well documented by the regulars on the bench, and in film, in books, and online. He had highs and he had lows. He collided with a building. One of his mates collided with a building. One of his mates died from secondary poisoning after consuming a rat. One of his offspring shattered a wing and shoulder flying into the Metropolitan Museum of Art. His successes were celebrated and his troubles were instructive for so many people. He taught us about what it takes to be a wild bird in a city. In 2004, his nest was dismantled by misguided human beings. Only human activism brought it back. The building management of 927 Fifth, his home, removed the nest in a very famous incident that sparked demonstrations like you see here in front of the building. New York City Audubon led the charge to have the nest restored. So Board President Marcia Fowle, Executive Director E.J. McAdams, Parks Commissioner Adrian Benepe, and John Flicker of National Audubon represented Pale Male's supporters and met with the building co-op president to explain why they just could not evict the world's most famous red-tailed hawk. As Adrian put it, we just marched in there and said, well, we represent the Lollipop Guild and you just can't do this. New York City Audubon persuaded the building to allow a metal cage to be installed at the site, and that would catch the debris that the hawks generated, and the hawks came back. So Pale Male had several mates in his 30+ years of life, including Lola and Xena, and he parented many broods of red-tailed hawks. In 2019, he was mated to his 8th red-tailed female, Octavia, and while Pale Male has now passed away, his mate Octavia continues her story. She's been seen with other hawks and may already have a new younger male mate. So what is his legacy? We all talk about that now. Pale Male sparked the formation of a special kind of community. They sat on benches at the model boat pond. They trained their scopes and their bins on a building on 5th Avenue and 74th Street, and they shared their views with passersby and thrilled to the quotidian life of a red-tailed hawk and his mate. Many of the people who passed by had no idea that a raptor could survive and thrive in a steel and concrete city like ours, that a magnificent urban park like Central Park and others like it, small and large, could support more than squirrels, robins, and sparrows. Pale Male gave us all a special access, a special opportunity to witness the behavior of a charismatic raptor, and he taught so many New Yorkers that nature's intricate and compelling dramas could happen here, not just in the great wildernesses. Pale Male's life, his challenges, his successes awoke many New Yorkers to birds and their challenges, traffic, collisions with the built environment, rodenticide. And he taught all of us that protecting the nature that thrives here is our job. Nests need protection, rodenticide and pesticide must be regulated, buildings need to turn off their lights at night and make their glass visible to migratory species, and conservation groups and rehabbers need funding. One hawk prompted people like you to take part in protecting the urban biodiversity of our city. So let's talk about that. How do we do that here at New York City Audubon? Our nonprofit is growing significantly to have more impact in the spaces and places that birds call home. Our board is growing. We welcome 5 new motivated board members tonight, and they bring special skills and passions that we know will help us build on the work already underway these past 4 decades. We're growing our audience. We're capitalizing on the post-pandemic interest in birds, and we're activating people to take action to help birds. We have more than doubled our email list, our social media followers, and our website visitations. If you found us through Instagram or social media, welcome. We're happy to have you here. Our Summer Environmental Center on Governor's Island has allowed us to capture the interest of nearly 1 million visitors to the island every year. And this summer you can visit and join a bird outing and try to spot up to 220 species that have been seen on Governor's Island. You can see and learn about different ways to make glass birds safe, and you can enjoy work from our Artist in Residence program. Our geographic reach has also extended. We engage more zip codes in New York City now than ever before. Our programming continues to expand and to be accessible, which is very important. We offer bird outings across all 5 boroughs with more than 300 free experiences this year alone, and you'll hear more about this tonight. And we have more committed supporters and volunteers like you. This year saw a record number of volunteers for us, 130 for Project Safe Flight alone. To do all this, we have very excitedly expanded our staff post-COVID, and we're building our capacity in advocacy and conservation. We'll tell you later this evening about new projects and initiatives where New York City Audubon is leading the way. This growth and your voices married to our conservation and science work mean that our impact can accelerate and expand. We're looking at buildings, monitoring more Project Safe Flight routes in the city and working with buildings to do more bird safe retrofits. We're on the water. Our decades-long water bird population tracking and reporting has found precipitous declines in our water birds, and that has forced the National Park Service to take action on predation. We're monitoring green spaces and roofs, sharing our data that show that habitat can be productive even many stories up and even in a small park. And we have invited in so many more voices for advocacy. You'll hear more about that this evening with our success on lights out legislation recently. So a lot is going on at New York City Audubon, and I want to just circle back to Pale Male for a second. At New York City Audubon, we know that sometimes it's just one single bird, large, small, colorful, drab, melodious, raucous, that can be the ambassador that brings people into conservation. It's how most of us got here. Pale Male was the gateway bird for many New Yorkers. He engaged new audiences and he showed us the beauty of the natural world, and he made us confront the challenges that we humans have presented that natural world with in our city. He challenged us to be part of the solutions, and he motivated people like you. This nonprofit began in 1979 when Lou Rosenberg and a group of birders raised their voices in opposition to the overpruning of the Ramble habitat. Lou and his peers in Central Park launched a movement in New York City on behalf of birds. When Pale Male's nest was ripped apart, activism led by this nonprofit brought it back. Every day, we build on the legacy of conservation action using decades of data and science to inform our work on behalf of birds. Bird-safe building laws, lights out legislation, conservation actions, all of these rely on your voices. We thank each one of you for being part of this legacy and for advocating for a better city for birds and people. This evening may be hazy, but our shared mission is very clear, and we thank you so much for joining us tonight. Deborah, back to you.
Thank you, Karen. This concludes the official business of the annual meeting of members. Next, I invite Jessica Wilson, New York City Audubon's Executive Director, to share news on our organization.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Karen, for such an inspiring remarks about Pale Male, about our legacy, and about our future. For 44 years, as you've heard, New York City Audubon has worked to protect birds and make the city a more sustainable place for birds and for people. The protection of birds depends on our work and support across all of the city's communities. The more people who hear our message and the more people who help us help birds, the better. Equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, what we call by the acronym EDIA, has been a central pillar of New York City Audubon's strategic plan for years. We've worked consistently to center EDIA in our conservation work, in our engagement efforts, and our advocacy and outreach. My colleagues and I are proud to share some of those highlights with you this evening. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dustin Partridge, New York City Audubon's Director of Conservation and Science.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you all for joining us. So I'd like you to take a look at this map and think about where all the critical habitats are for birds. And what you notice is that they're distributed across the entire city. Birds don't really understand neighborhood borders. And you know, we're out here looking at these habitats, and you can picture all the different spaces that you've seen these incredible birds and these places that they rely. And these are the same areas that are essential for nesting and foraging areas. These are the areas that birds are colliding with buildings. And these are the areas that are in need of more green space through green infrastructure. So while you're looking at this map, also notice the icons that are throughout it. These are all the places we're working to conserve birds. The bird in flight indicates all of the areas that we are working in Project Safe Flight. We're growing these locations to make the city safer for birds to navigate through. The building with a tree on top of it, those are all the locations where we are working to improve green infrastructure and introduce new green infrastructure, habitat for birds that's also beneficial for people. And the wading bird indicates all of the many locations where we're actively working to protect water birds and their nesting and foraging areas, which are actually incredibly diverse and dense in this important urban harbor. And finally, these binoculars indicate all the areas where we're engaging people in the excitement of birding and seeing birds throughout the city. More on this later from my colleague Rosalind. Now, I wanted to point out that across the world, science has demonstrated that conservation is most successful when communities participate. So in this next slide, what we see is an example of this case playing out. This is true in faraway areas, so areas where people may parachute in and take part in conservation for a while and then leave. Those projects are not as successful as when local communities are leading the charge or engaged in the project. An example here is in this figure. The orange and yellow are areas where the community engagement the community was engaged in the conservation of birds. The higher the box that you see, the more successful that conservation ever. And what you see here is that where communities participate, in almost all cases, the bird conservation is more successful than when the community is left out. Now, this is true across the globe. It's also true in this very city. So what we have to do is we cannot just drop into neighborhoods and tell people what is needed and expect conservation success. We need to work with communities and work with neighborhoods. And we're doing this now. We're doing this through a number of different programs that we have underway, including the Bronx River, which you see here. We're now conducting surveys along the length of the Bronx River and to look at the recent success of restoration and how this restoration might be working to protect birds and enhance habitat for birds. And we're doing this with community participation. We've now grown Project Safe Flight to be in all 5 boroughs, and we have a record number of volunteers, a record number of new buildings monitored. And this is happening for the first time in areas where we've never been before. And it's being led by people in the community that are doing the monitoring. And finally, we're also rethinking how we do surveys in the Rockaways, engaging residents instead of just engaging residents in ways to conduct surveys instead of just doing surveys in their communities. So through this, we're going to be more successful. It's this community engagement that is key to our success and always has been a key to our success with New York City Audubon. And conservation and engagement go hand in hand. So for more on engagement, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Rosalind Rivas, the New York City Audubon's Public Programs Manager. Thank you, Rosalind.
Hey, thanks so much, Dustin, and thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. So I was born and raised in the Bronx, and despite growing up in a heavily urbanized city, or maybe because of it, I was always drawn to the natural world and wildlife. And I remember seeing cardinals and blue jays outside my window for the first time and keeping an observation chart of all the birds I'd see and jotting down their behaviors. And I wouldn't go anywhere without my 10-pound animal encyclopedia. And if you know me, you probably heard me say that my origin story took place at the Bronx Zoo, which fostered my love for animals and wildlife conservation. Living in a city like New York also made it clear to me how valuable our remaining green spaces are, and that not everyone has access to green space, especially the most marginalized of us, Black and Brown people, Indigenous community, and the poor. Which is why we're working to meet people where they are around the city. We're going into neighborhoods and parks across the 5 boroughs that we don't often visit, and especially in the most forgotten neighborhoods like the Bronx or Staten Island. And we're making these outings more physically accessible as well. For example, holding bird sits or blanket birding. And if you see these photos right here on the left is one of the sunset hike at Shirley Chisholm State Park for Black Birders Week that I led. And on the right, we have a photo of our blanket birding outing with the Feminist Bird Club, which was so great. And then we're also trying to bring as many guides into our team from as many backgrounds as possible, of different age ranges, and also of different knowledge of languages too. So we're trying to focus more on multilingual outings and multilingual guides. Like these examples in the left is a Spanish English bilingual birding event that I led at Brooklyn Bridge Park last week, actually. And on the right, an event that I co-led with Haley Scott that included us teaching bird names in Spanish and also NYCHA Algonquin dialect. And you may have also recently heard of the new Spanish-English field guide that we just printed, which was adapted from Dr. Ana Moreno's original book. It has been many years in the making, but it's finally here and we've begun distribution around the city. The field guides are totally free and you can visit our website to find out how you can get one of your own. Also, earlier this year, we began a partnership with the Fund for Public Housing called NYCHA in Nature. And the whole idea behind this program is to bring birding to NYCHA complexes, to their housing in their own backyard, which are very green. Many of them are basically a park surrounded by buildings. So they have a lot of natural habitat in their own space where a lot of birds can thrive. And we're in the early stages of the program right now, but you can see an example of when we did an event, a NYCHA Nature event in the Lower East Side. And our end goal is to hand over this program of NYCHA in Nature over to the resident councils of these NYCHA housing complexes so that they can continue to hold these kinds of events for anyone who wants to participate in these housing campuses and also in the general public. And we're also being more thoughtful about the format, content, and pricing of our events. some more beginning birding experiences for people, and switching up the times of day that we go out. For example, in the evening, for those who can't really make it in the morning or are working in the morning. And we have also committed to having 2/3 of our programs every year to be free. So, and you'll see some of our programs are paid outings in the various parks around the city, but we do want to make sure we can have as many people participate without a financial barrier as well. And of course, even with all of this programming, this expanded programming, we're continuing to host all the bird outings and classes that you probably come to love and look forward to every year for decades. And in some of NYC's most well-known and most birdie spots, like Central Park or Prospect Park. And our engagement efforts are really an integral part of our advocacy work. So I am going to hand this over now back to Jessica to talk about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosalind. So as you heard from Rosalind's great work and the rest of the staff, we're engaging thousands of New Yorkers with birds and nature. And that number is growing every year with our new NYCHA nature program, with our new beginner birding outings all over the city, with our presence on Governor's Island. And just imagine if we could get all of those bird lovers and the rest of our growing audience to raise their voices to protect birds and habitat. New York City Audubon's advocacy efforts aim to do just that. We're working on a few key pieces of legislation right now, which will protect urban biodiversity and make the city more sustainable for people too. First up is an expanded green roof tax abatement. You heard from Dustin earlier a little bit about our green roof work. Green roofs are important havens for birds and other wildlife. They're good for the city too. They reduce stormwater runoff and energy costs. Working with other green roof advocates, New York City Audubon right now is pushing for an expanded green roof tax abatement in state legislature. That tax abatement would increase green roof development in environmentally vulnerable priority districts of the city. Those same districts that are getting hard hit by air pollution like what we're experiencing this week. The bill will make it easier for property managers and developers to get access to that tax abatement, extend the duration of the abatement program, and increase the incentives for green roofs in other areas of the city. The priority districts with the expanded abatement were chosen to help people, but of course, that same green space that people need is also critical for birds, especially in urban and industrial areas without a lot of green space. Another advocacy priority this year, which you've probably heard about, is our Lights Out legislation work. As you know, one of our key initiatives is to make the city's built environment safer for birds. And one of the biggest threats to birds across the country is collisions with windows. Our scientists estimate that nearly 250,000 birds die every year in New York City alone as a result of collisions. You might remember that New York City Audubon has been working on this for a while. In 2019, we helped the passage of a landmark building law, Local Law 15, which now requires the use of bird-friendly glass in new and renovated buildings. And just a few years ago in 2021, we were at the forefront of getting milestone Lights Out legislation passed for city-owned and managed buildings. We're on the next step of that now. Just last month, a new bill was introduced in City Council, a Lights Out bill that would require privately owned commercial and industrial buildings to turn their lights off at night, reducing the threat that artificial light at night poses to migratory birds. The bill is now making its way through City Council, and we need everyone's support to see it through. The more voices we get, the more effective we'll be in advocating for this legislation and systemic protections for birds. So while we are working hard to engage those thousands of public program participants and Governor's Island visitors, we need your help too. Please, this week, tonight, call your City Council member's office and ask them to support the Lights Out bill. There's more information on our website, and my colleague Aiden is dropping some information into the Zoom chat right now with a link to that website and a sample script you can use when you're calling or emailing your City Council member. As we've been talking about, the power of New York City Audubon lies in connecting up our decades of conservation data, the thousands of people we engage across the city, and our advocacy efforts to get all New Yorkers involved in the fight to protect birds. And of course, a big part of that work is our upcoming name change. Karen Benfield is back to talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Our name change is, as Jessica noted, part of a continuum in our work. We began this process in the summer of 2022. Around that time, just prior, conversations about the Audubon name had been taking place among different chapters. And we felt, as an urban chapter serving a very diverse audience, that we should consider our four-decade-old name against that backdrop. We considered the impact of the Audubon name on the three prongs of our work. We weighed it against our conservation work, our engagement work, and our advocacy work. And we weighed the financial aspects of a name change as well, and estimating possible revenue loss and gain with change, and as well as the hard cost of a rebrand, which we knew would not be insignificant. Our board committees weighed the name against the work of each committee, and through one-on-one conversations at events, we explored the topic with our community, our partners, our stakeholders, and our donors. And we shared this name assessment process, which you may have seen on our website, which shows what our trajectory has been. So July, August 2022, Seattle Audubon announced an intention to change their name. National Audubon began their task force, and we were working sort of in parallel timeline. So we are now at the stage where we have made the determination to change our name while the national organization has not. But I wanted to share some of the feedback that we have received with you, and share some of the voices from our community who have expressed how they feel about it. And we share these quotes and many others in our newest special edition of the Urban Audubon, which you may receive by mail or online. So these first two quotes come from board members Christian Cooper and Angie Coe. Chris really sums it up. A diversity of birds in the world depends on a diversity of people working on their behalf, and that really underscores our work. And as Angie notes, this is the next inclusive step in our work, changing our name. And to the next slide. These are from two staff members, Jessica and Rosalind. And Rosalind spoke a little bit about her perspective as an Afro-Latina birder. We've received a number of comments and notes from diverse birders who feel represented in our decision, and we're proud of that. The next slide. These are long ones. I'm going to let you read them for a minute. But we heard from many individuals who told us that it was hard to find a place for themselves or to feel a part of a conservation movement that they felt didn't include them, and that we've received a number of comments relaying that the decision to change our name makes them feel included. We knew that many people were telling us, I don't want to wear a cap that has the name Audubon on it. As a Black or brown person, that doesn't feel right to me, and that is hurtful. So that's part of why I applaud your decision. Next slide. We also received comments that were not positive, and these two comments share different perspectives. The name change is meaningless. You can't change history simply by removing names or statues, or removing statues. There's always been a level of prestige to the Audubon name. If you're getting rid of that, you're making a big mistake. We've heard that, and we took these comments to heart as well in our assessment. Next slide. These last two comments, and you can read many more of these in the Urban Audubon, speak to accessibility and inclusion, but I think the last one really sums it up. It's honestly one of my favorite comments that we did receive through this process. I loved the Audubon name. It was perfect. It was compact, unusual, and melodious. It merged art and science, and it evoked just one thing, birds, until it evoked something else. And that is something that is beautifully said, and that is something that we heard a lot, is that once you know something about Audubon that doesn't represent birds to you, represents another image entirely, it is difficult to put that out of your mind. So these are some comments. If you want to take a deeper dive, please, I encourage you to check out the Urban Audubon. I am going to toss now to my amazing Executive Vice President, Mike Yuen, who has some more to share about our mission, which does not change, even as we scale our impact and consider a name change. Mike?
Thanks, Karen. Our decision to change our name is an important step to ensure we continue to welcome everyone to the conservation movement. Our work won't change and will remain focused on birds. We're one of nearly 500 chapters of the National Audubon, and we're a partner in the New York, Connecticut chapter network. I'll say a few words about our role in both. As a committed chapter of the National Audubon Network, we share its vision for a better world for birds and people. A key objective of National's just released strategic plan is to stem the loss of 3 billion birds since 1970. It's 3 billion birds, 1 in 4 birds. All chapters are committed to taking meaningful action to reverse this decline and to bend the bird curve, so to speak. Urban areas like ours represent significant bird habitat that can provide oases to migrants in their incredible journeys. They can also present consequential threats. Challenges like building collisions and light pollution, they happen in our backyard. So through our research, our volunteers, and our advocacy efforts, and your support, we aim to provide green infrastructure and bird-friendly environments in our city, and to unite with nationwide initiatives to halt the loss and create a positive trajectory for the birds. Our chapter's scientific research also contributes to National Audubon's Bird Migration Explorer, shown here on the slide. This is a digital platform that visualizes birds' amazing movements and the obstacles they encounter and how it is all connected. Our very own science has supported this. We have a nano-tagging semi-palmated sandpiper project, which has added valuable data and insights to the migration behavior shown on the platform. As for the New York, Connecticut State Chapter Network, we're an active and leading member among 27 chapters that make up the network. We have monthly calls, and we have an annual conference to connect, share ideas, and support each other in our goals of preserving wildlife and habitat, and also engaging with our communities. Specifically, we form coalitions when needed to promote our shared interests, like protecting the health of Jamaica Bay and addressing the management of it. We partner on lights out initiatives that will help birds stay safe on their travels. And we're also working together to curb the use of neonic pesticides that are harmful to beneficial insects and consequently the birds. But regardless of how we're named, we have a shared future with our fellow chapters and the national network. Birds ultimately require us to work together. Our chapter will continue to welcome everyone to experience the joy of birds and become advocates for their prosperity. By uniting our efforts, we can make a significant difference for the birds we love. With that, I'll turn it back to Karen to share our next steps on the renaming.
Thanks, Mike. This was a difficult decision for our organization, I won't lie, but it was a necessary one. You may not agree with our decision. We know no decision will please or satisfy everyone, but we hope that our unwavering commitment to birds, to habitat and green roofs, advocacy for bird-safe building practice, and engagement with New Yorkers will keep you engaged with our mission and reassure you as we make this name change. As a board, as fiduciaries and stewards of the organization, we invested significant time and earnest reflection in the process. We educated ourselves, and in the end, we voted to make a decision not just for the Audubon chapter that you're part of today, but for the organization that we need to be for the future. Conservation success depends on inclusion and the voices and resources of many. So as we approach the year ahead and the determination of a new name, we are super excited about the process. We're collectively proud as a board and a staff of this decision, and we're proud to be an organization that's not afraid of reflection and change. We don't yet have a new name. It's going to take us some time to get there and to collect input and come up with a name that is inclusive and welcoming to all New Yorkers, that signifies the work we do and where we do it. So over the next months, we'll be collecting feedback and ideas from important stakeholders, including members, for our new name. You can find information about that on our website, and we expect to announce the new name sometime in 2024. I now welcome Matthew Cootie, our Director of Development, to make some remarks. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm going to lead a little bit of a Q&A. So remember to put your questions in the Q&A down below, and we can answer some of those, and I'll try to moderate those with all of our panelists. But first, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. You know, none of this work, I know people say that from every nonprofit, but none of this work would be possible without your support and your partnership. From everyone to our members, as you can see here in this slide, which is such a passionate community that we're so fortunate to be a part of. On to, you can go to the next slide, all of our donors and funders. This is just a small subset of all of the amazing institutions that support us. And there's such an incredible story behind each and every one of these, the projects they support, and the relationships that we have with them. So we're so fortunate to have them as well. We can't forget our volunteers as well. We talked a lot about them earlier. There's just a massive network of hundreds of volunteers that help us in every single one of these initiatives. And it's so impressive to see their work happen across the city. I think you all know that we're a very small organization, but these volunteers really help us really punch above our weight, I should say. And I also just want to say, part of this volunteer system is all of our partners, all the partner organizations, again, all across New York City, all across the nation, really, that help us really get our work done. And I would be remiss to not mention our board of directors and our advisory council. Our board puts in countless hours every single week to help us get all of these things done as well. So thank you. And on that point, I just want to mention that I'm really excited to bring on the new board members as well. And I'm excited to work with you. I know we all are at the staff level. So Q&A section, and I think I will ask everyone to kind of put their cameras back on and get ready for some of the questions. I've been fielding some. I know a few of the people were really, I think this is probably a good question for Rosalind. A lot of people were really interested in the NYCHA Nature program, and probably a related question. I think just tell more about NYCHA Nature, but also just about the communities that you've been really excited to work with lately. Favorite communities, if you can pick one.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's great. I'm happy to talk about it. So, right, so earlier this year, kind of nearing the end of last year, we had this idea with Alex Zablocki of the Public Housing, who is the Executive Director of the Public Housing Community Fund. I should correct myself from earlier. I think I said Fund for Public Housing, but they went through a name change of their own. So now they're the Public Housing Community Fund. But and with this idea of bringing birding to these communities, these NYCHA communities, who really do have a lot of green space around their neighborhoods and inside their actual housing complex. And we were thinking of doing at least one in each borough, at least to start. So our first one was really in the Lower East Side, and that depending on where the housing complexes are located, we tend to want to get a group where there's a big cluster, so that as many neighboring campuses and the general public can join in. But we have also, we want to continue doing them in, we've decided for each borough, Mariners Harbor for Staten Island, Beach 41st Street in Queens, Bayview, and Soundview in the Bronx. And we also partner with some local organizations around each of these neighborhoods. For example, the Jamaica Bay Rockaway Park Conservancy that would help us spread the word, and also maybe even offer some people to volunteer leading these events. in the Queens, Brooklyn section, Jamaica Bay in general. Yeah, so we're really in the starting phase, but we are hoping to expand this more. And like I said earlier, really involve the resident councils of the complexes.
That's great. And actually, that reminds me, it's kind of a side note question, but Dustin, you had a good story about one of the complexes, right? With the kind of interaction with the community and the birds.
Yeah, it's an amazing how much, as Rosalind said, how much green space is out in these communities. And there are a number of spots where there are incredible yellow-crowned night heron nests. And you know, it is an incredible site that's been set aside and protected, and these birds are there. And a number of people in the community really do love having them there, as well as there are mixed feelings, and that's some of the work that we're doing to engage and work with the community to monitor those sites, which is really incredible to see.
And since we have you on already, I think a few other people were kind of asking more about community-led conservation projects. You know, what are the strategies for support for community-initiated projects? That could be similar related type of question, but maybe for both you, Dustin, and Rosalind.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to having, for example, one of the things that we're working to do with the yellow-crowned night herons is have community-led projects where they're going to go out and actually do the community-led surveys, where they go out and count the nests as part of the effort. And it's partially because you know, they are there and living with these amazing animals, and it's an incredible future that's out there. Other examples that might be more familiar to people that are on the webinar are Project Safe Flight. So a lot of the areas that we're monitoring through Project Safe Flight are out now. We're in all 5 boroughs, and a lot of the people that are monitoring those routes that we have live right nearby. That's another example of community-based conservation. And just kind of like what the examples of what we talked about earlier, some of the early examples of New York City Audubon's conservation successes. When there are people that are living right near some sort of a conservation issue and engaged with that issue, it's far more likely to be successful. So we're trying to grow that more as we're going forward.
Yeah, and
Sorry,
well,
go ahead.
as Dustin
Please.
mentioned earlier too about the Bronx River survey project that we're just starting, that is also another project that hopefully we can have the community involved. And I'm really excited about it, not just because I'm a Bronxite, but it involves work with one of our great partners, the Bronx River Alliance, which we just started to really create more events with and outings with. They are just a really great just organization for the Bronx River, for the Bronx, and we actually are going to have a lot more, including paddle and birding. So stay tuned for that. But we love the fact that we can organize with different groups in local neighborhoods, and then also to further engagement and conservation, because they're very interconnected.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, that's a great point, Rosalind. One of the things that's kind of an interesting aspect of that project specifically is so our field biologist Emilio is currently riding his bike 30 miles to do this, which is a big feat to do the surveys. But one of the things that we're really excited to get going is bike with a biologist, because so many people, what does a biologist do in New York City? So we're going to have community members join Emilio on his bike ride, stopping at 24 sites along the river, doing the surveys with Emilio. And it's a great way to get information. It's a great way to get people engaged in science and in conservation.
That's great. And I'll have some more questions for you, but I know I want to go to some of the other panelists. This one might be for Jessica, but we mentioned Governor's Island earlier, and I thought it might be a good opportunity to kind of talk about the artist in residency program and kind of those kinds of things happening in the summer, over the course of the summer.
Sure, I'm happy to take that. I'm speaking here on behalf of Jessie McLaughlin, who's on staff as our engagement and advocacy associate and has done such a terrific job in building out our presence and our work on Governor's Island this past year. We've had a seasonal presence on Governor's Island for several years. We have a pop-up, not pop-up, but a seasonal nature center in one of the historic houses on the island. where we have staff there from Friday to Sunday, from May through October. We also do free weekly bird outings led by the terrific Andy Barry, who knows the island backwards and forwards and all of those 220 species that have been cited there. A few really exciting features for Governor's Island this year is the relaunch of our Artist in Residence program, as Matthew said, where we're highlighting 3 artists who work at the intersection of art and conservation, with some really exciting installations and displays, as well as an open studio and workshops where people can come talk to them about how they make art. The first exhibit of their work is, I think, starting in just a few weeks. And so we invite everyone to come out and check that out. And then in addition to that, the ways that we engage island visitors with birds and nature, we're also working to inform and educate island visitors with our conservation priorities, including bird-friendly buildings. We have turned our house on Nolan Park into a demonstration site for bird-friendly windows, and are demonstrating different ways that you, as a New York City resident, can make your own windows bird-friendly with different kinds of films and painted patterns that you can do on your glass. You can come check that out. You can see some glass samples, and you can see actions you can take, or you can pressure your building management company to take to protect birds. There's lots more information on our website about Governor's Island. We'd love to see you out there this summer.
Thanks, Jessica. This one might be a good question for Mike, but a question about kind of the larger network. And I know, Mike, that you've been to a lot of the conferences and have a lot of kind of interaction with some of the other Audubon organizations and just other bird organizations across the nation, really. So can you explain a little bit more about how that all works, that kind of ecosystem, for lack of a better word?
I could speak to the New York, Connecticut network that we're a member of. It's great to partner with organizations all over the state, ranging from large organizations like ours that have a staff, and then these smaller volunteer-led organizations. I think the power is really in just seeing how like a grassroots network can work when you have passionate people behind these goals. So we do interact a lot at these conferences where we try to like bounce ideas off each other and what we're doing. We share what we're doing, and then we're trying to pick up little tidbits from everything that every chapter says. So it's great to just kind of like mix with a bunch of the like-minded people at these things.
Oh, that's great. And I'm sure Dustin probably has some to add to that because he attends a lot of these. And I know one of our staff members is at a conference right now.
Yeah, it's such a great and important network to remain part of. And you know, we just, for example, were meeting yesterday about state legislation for making buildings safer across the state. And part of that is like Mike had mentioned, is that the birds that are in New York City one day, they're outside of New York City the next. So it's really important to work on conserving not just what's happening in New York City, but throughout the state, throughout the entire East Coast up into Canada, down to Latin America even. That's great. And I'm going to read this question that somebody sent because it's fun because they're so excited about all of the projects that you're working on. But this is probably again for you, Dustin. Sorry. But they're saying bird-friendly buildings, lights out, Munich bands, green roofs. So exciting. What's next? Green corridors between large and small green open space, which I think is a good lead into kind of what you're most excited about and what you've taken on in the past year and that kind of thing in the conservation realm. Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you get me started on green infrastructure, I'll go on for a long time. It's one of my favorite bits. But yeah, I mean, I saw that, and it's so true. The green corridors, and that really is kind of the next step. And partially, those green corridors are not just kind of alone. So it's not just creating a swath of green space, but we're doing this in almost a piecemeal way, where it might be a park that's being improved, a green space that's improved, a bioswale or a green roof. Especially for birds, these are all interacting with each other. And we're getting to a critical number that now where green roofs are no longer kind of, in certain areas, green roofs are no longer acting as kind of isolated islands. They're becoming part of this larger network. You may have noticed if you've been anywhere kind of in many parts of the city where you can get up a little bit higher, you're seeing a lot more of these green roofs pop up. And at some point, these roofs are very much going to start functioning just like that corridor that the attendee mentioned. They're going to be moving between larger green spaces, smaller green spaces, functioning as a larger ecological space as opposed to these isolated habitats, which is really exciting to see.
It's exciting. I love that work. So for Karen, you talked a lot about pale mail, and so I know this kind of celebrity bird thing is a thing. But how did you first get engaged in this work?
I was lucky enough to attend a number of New York City Audubon excursions or outings, and that sort of nurtured an interest that was already there. I live in the Upper West Side, and I live, I guess, in a little celebrity bird hotspot because from my roof, I have a fantastic view of the peregrine falcon family at 86th and West End, which I believe I've spoken about them a number of times, so everybody knows that's my jam. They have 3 IASs this year who are strutting about and losing their downy feathers and starting to look more like ravenous falcons. But you know, I don't have a green roof on my building. I wish I did. Even without a green roof, I get blue jays and catbirds and a lot of chimney swifts adjacent to my building. So I can only imagine the thrill that New York City can look forward to when there are green roofs on many, many buildings. And there is this corridor that Dustin has mentioned. It'll be a thrill for everybody. And I won't talk more about the peregrines, but if you want something fun to do, go to 86th and West End and stand at the bus stop, and you will see and hear a ravenous trio, and they're very loving and doting parents any time of the day.
Amazing. And don't get Dustin started on chimney swifts, because that's one of his favorite things to talk about too. But this question probably is for Rosalind, but you mentioned accessibility a little bit in your segment. And can you talk a little bit more about how that looks in birding and kind of what you would like to implement at New York City Audubon in general, or what you would be excited about doing around accessibility?
Yeah, so we are really trying to bring more awareness and notice on accessibility in the actual outings themselves, but also online on our website, for example, or any kind of virtual things that we do. For example, closed captioning, just in our website, in every event page now, you'll notice that we have a little section called Note on Accessibility. So for any park we visit, we try to write down different traits that some people might want to know before getting there, like, are there restrooms? What kind of public transportation is close by? Is there free parking? Things like that. And even if a place isn't 100% accessible, it's still good to jot it down so people know what to expect before they get there. And so just little things like that, I think can make a big difference in just making sure people are aware of what kind of events they're about to attend. If it's something very rigorous, if they expect a lot of steep hills, like if for those who are may have mobility issues, and at the same time too, doing things that, for example, focus more on birding by ear for those who may be visually impaired, or anything along those lines. And like I mentioned before, bird sits or blanket birding, which I really love. I love that phrase. Just as a way to really get a lot of people together and just make it so that it's a relaxed, inviting, welcoming a time, so that it doesn't feel like it's so unapproachable birding, like this exclusive club that you have to really have like $200 binoculars or whatnot to get into. So yeah, so a lot of what I've been trying to do since I started is to just make sure that people know that birding and the kind of work that we do is for everyone. It's not something that should be gate kept.
Oh, that's perfect. And one of the questions, actually, it's kind of a little bit specific, but it's around our new urban Audubon. So there was some changes in the most recent issue, and kind of I think the question is more around like, what's the plan and how is the urban Audubon changing? And Jessica, you might be the best one to answer this.
Sure, I'm happy to take that. For the non-members who have joined us on Zoom, the Urban Audubon is our print newsletter, which we've had for decades and is just such a treasure trove of terrific content and stories about New York City Audubon's work and about birds in general. It's been sort of the lifeblood of the organization and a through line really for 44 years. We are continuing the Urban Audubon, but we're trying some new things out. Our expanding audience means more opportunities to put content online and to find new ways of reaching some new people. And so we're testing out a few different things. Our longtime editor, Marcia Fowle, has retired from editing the newsletter. And Lauren Klingsberg, who has been a co-editor for some time, is bringing some terrific new ideas, joined by Andrew Moss on staff, taking on the legacy that Marcia and Todd Winston, our staff editor, had created, and of course, building on the terrific work that our founding editor, Lou Rosenberg, had started with this publication 40 years ago. We're streamlining the publication a little bit to reduce the number of pages and save paper, which I think fits for an environmental organization, and starting to have content both in the print pages as well as online. And so over the next few months, you're going to see some different things. You're going to see some new design and new content, and we would love to hear what you think about that. So please drop us a line. Let us know what works for you, what doesn't, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see online versus in print. We're really eager for that feedback.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. I really liked how somebody phrased, what Dustin was most excited about with the conservation work. But Jessica, what are you, putting you back on the spot? You've been here for about a year and a half now, as last year during the annual meeting was your first one. So what are you most excited about in the coming year?
I think the opportunity that we're starting to uncover, the magic of New York City Audubon that links all of our work, that builds on 44 years of advocacy efforts, on a really rich data set on water birds and bird collisions, that marries that data with the thousands of people in New York who are newly passionate about birds and nature, and those who have been for some time, and really activate all New Yorkers to raise their voices, to take action and protect birds. That's what I think is the differentiator for New York City Audubon. It's what sets us apart from other organizations in the city and from other Audubon chapters, is our ability to marry our conservation, our engagement, and our advocacy efforts to protect birds and their habitats across the city and across the flyway.
Well said. And I see Karen nodding. I'm going to put Karen on the spot as well, what she's most excited about as our board president.
I have to echo what Jessica says. I think that if you're a member or a board member or a member of the community, you are assuredly aware of this wave of excitement in our organization right now. We are embarking on this next stage of our growth, and there is this foundation of tremendous science and conservation work that has been done. And so we're all standing on the shoulders of the people who came before us to do this work. And I just think there's a wonderful energy and commitment afoot in the organization, that as we sort of expand our engagement and bring more people into it, that commitment and passion has always been there through everybody who's worked at this organization and been a part of our membership. But as we bring in more people and more voices and cross-pollinate with ideas and expertise, there's just this great moment where we are changing laws and bringing in legislation and making a real difference for birds in the city. And that's why we're here. We love to look at them, but we want them to thrive. So I just think it's a wonderful moment to be part of this organization. Every member I've ever met or spoken to has been an amazing person, a committed person. And I just think we learn from each other and we work well together. This is a great moment to be part of New York City Audubon.
Answer. And we already put Dustin on the spot, but Mike or Rosalind, do you have anything to add? What you're most excited about in the coming year?
Want to go first, Mike?
I'm excited. When I joined the board in 2019, and at that time, the board had put together a terrific strategic plan that really inspired me to join. And I'm really excited about how we're just executing on that plan now. Everyone is, from staff, board members, advisory council, has read this strategic plan page back to front and really understands what it takes to execute the plan. So I really love seeing that happen. I mean, it made my job easier to not be such a visionary in the creation of it, but there's another strategic plan that will be in development soon. So I'm really excited about just the momentum and the way we're going forward.
And for me, I mean, like, where do I even begin? I'm like, for things I'm excited about, but I mean, I talked a lot earlier about the things that we're doing and more the new kinds of events that we're bringing and the different kind of people. Yeah, I can't wait to just keep continuing that, and also forming new partnerships with different groups and organizations. We've been starting a lot of new collaborations with some groups like the Bronx Zoo, for example, or Brooklyn Bridge Park, just new things. And then every time we have a successful event, we on both sides get excited for doing more in the future, which is really great. So yeah, just really excited to get to see more of the organizations around the city and collaborate.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I had a couple more questions, but I feel like that was like a perfect wrap up of everything that we should do. So I think I'll kick it back to Jessica to wrap us up.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you to my colleagues and to our board members for joining tonight and for all the work that you do year-round. If we didn't get a chance to answer your questions, or if more occur to you, please reach out to us. We always love to chat, and any of us are available by phone or email, or just for a walk in the park or to go look for birds together. And I hope we'll see you out in person later this summer at one of our many bird outings around the city, at our wildlife festivals on Governor's Island, as we mentioned. I hope also you'll get involved, you'll raise your voice on lights out legislation, on green roof tax abatements, and on our other advocacy priorities. But you'll probably stay inside for a few more days. So it gives us a lot to think about as those wildfires bring that smoke-filled air to New York City. It's a reminder of just how important our work is. It gives us renewed passion and inspiration to keep working to protect birds and their habitat, to build green infrastructure, to support the restoration of the urban tree canopies that birds need, that mitigate the smoke and the particulate matter in the air. Our work has never been more important than it is right now, tonight, and we are so grateful for your involvement in it, for your support of that work, and for your partnership. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us and for being part of that work. Have a great night.